Okay. My name is Kurt Hurlbrink, and I'm a digital learning coordinator, and I work with the central area.
I'm Jennifer Underhill and digital learning coordinator also, and I work with the southern and the southeastern area.
And I am Tanya Churchill, also digital learning coordinator, and my area is south and southeast as well.
And then we do have two moderators with us, if they would like to introduce themselves as well.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Chris Zirkle. I'm a digital learning coordinator for the southern and southeastern areas.
And I'm Mary Klavick, and I'm a digital learning coordinator for the southwestern area. Nice to have everybody with us.
And Chris and Mary Clay will be checking the chat for us along the way.
Okay, so this morning, we're going to talk about the station rotation model. We'll get some sort of housekeeping stuff out of the way first, and then we'll actually define what that means, what station rotation means, and what they look like, and what the roles are for the students and the teachers. Then we'll move on and we'll talk a little bit about some management pieces. We'll take a break, give you a chance to ask any questions. And then towards the end, you are going to have some time to actually explore. So we have a lot of samples, a lot of resources, templates, and we're going to give you a chunk of time to actually explore. And then we're going to pull everybody back and we're going to do a little reflection on what you noticed during that exploration time. We'll share some additional resources, and then we'll wrap things up and get you on with the rest of your day. So by the end of today, hopefully, you'll be able to define and understand what a station rotation is, what it looks like. You'll understand why it's important to establish norms and routines. You'll also be able to utilize management resources for lesson design. And you'll also be able to find support from your digital learning coordinator, so that if you need help and support, those folks can actually assist you. So the North Carolina Digital Learning Standards, today we've highlighted three. Our session really focuses on empowered learner, digital citizen, and knowledge constructor. And I believe in the presentation, Tanya, doesn't that link out?
Yes, the middle links out to the actual document with all of the standards and descriptors.
So you can always click and take a look at those. So as we get started, the station rotation model is really just designed to allow kids to kind of rotate through different stations. They're all aligned with a learning goal. It can be fixed, it can be flexible. It's entirely up to you how you structure it. I think in a lot of the samples and the examples and things like that, you're going to find that it's all data driven. So the teacher's using data to group those kids. The teacher is always part of a rotation, so it's not free time. You're actually working with students. And it does always include some sort of online instruction piece. So when you're working with your kids, for you as the teacher, you're doing some direct instruction, right? You're having a mini lesson, you're pulling a group, working on skills. You can be doing that whole group, you can be doing that small group, but you are providing real-time feedback to whoever you're working with. And you're also using whatever assessment, pre-assessment, etc., whatever information you have to actually group your students and target instruction towards them. And then for your kids, what they're doing, typically you're going to see kind of a 3 rotation model. However, you'll also see examples where teachers have set it up. They might have 5 or 6 rotations. It just depends on how many kids you have, what kind of content you have to cover. But for your students, the 3 that you most likely will see will be students working in an online learning station, a no-tech station, and then some sort of a collaborative learning station, okay? So that's kind of the gist of what those kids will be doing when they're not with you. And as you start to build this in your classroom, it's important to keep in mind, first, in order to be successful, you have to have a relationship with your students. And so you in that group with those kids is going to give you the opportunity to actually build some relationships with your kids, strengthen the relationships you already have with your students. The second piece is the data. So you're going to use data to drive what you're doing. So you're going to pre-assess your kids. You're going to then take that information, group your kids, and then target their instruction based off of that. It's important to keep in mind that these groups are constantly changing. So just because I'm in group A on this day does not mean that I'm going to be in group A for the rest of this school year. I'm constantly moving in and out wherever I need support, wherever I need help. And then I think the third one, and to me, this is probably the most important, is to customize it. Make it work for you. You're going to see a lot of stuff, a lot of templates, a lot of examples, but those aren't necessarily the rules. So take it and take what works for you and make it fit into your classroom, make it fit into your instructional practice. We do have a link there at the bottom. So if you want some more information on that, you can go out to that Blending Learning Universe link and read more there. So we have a quote here. We'll just take or give you about a minute or so to kind of read that. So we know that a lot of us are in a situation where we've got in-person happening, we may have virtual happening. The cool thing is that you can do a variation of this with your at-home kids as well. You can have different activities, and we're going to give you some samples a little bit later to show you possible activities or possible ways you might share. But if we think about it, so students who are in person might be grouped like in a square. So if this were a non-COVID situation, those desks would probably be pretty close together so that they can actually collaborate and communicate and talk with each other. If we have to incorporate social distancing, then obviously those squares are going to be spread out a little more, but there would still be some collaboration and communication amongst the students so that they can turn and talk, they can ask questions. The students who are at home can also be grouped together so that they can easily move from synchronous to asynchronous instruction, right? So they might be together for a mini lesson, and then they're going to break off and do something on their own. The teacher, as the teacher, you would decide how much time is spent, whether it's fixed, whether it's a fluid movement. We've seen it done both ways, but that would be your call in your classroom. And then this quote as well. Educators recognize that there's room to manipulate the model to customize elements of the learning experience for their students. Sometimes the best rewards for students come when teachers relinquish control of the model over to the students, gradually giving them more ownership and agency in their learning. So obviously what we want to do is to develop those skills in our kids so that they can take ownership, that they do have a voice. So anyway, that's from Blended Learning Universe as well. So we have this video. We're not going to play the whole thing. And actually, I'm just going to share some thoughts as Tanya advances it. But this is an 8th grade middle school, or students in an 8th grade in a middle school. She is doing the station rotation model. And we're going to just take a look real quick. So here, she's giving the directions. So she's explaining what they're all going to be doing. And then in a minute, those kids are going to actually break out and they move the desks around and they get into their groups. And then here she's got, this is the targeted group. So this is the group that she's going to be working with. and she's having them retake a quiz. And then she's actually now with those kids. So she's sitting there. So she's an active part of their discussion. They're explaining why they answered the questions a certain way. And then she's providing some support to sort of redirect them and help reinforce the skills that were on that assessment. And then here is just, again, another shot. At this point, she has taken 2 small groups, pushed them together to form one big group. But again, she's doing the targeted instruction. Those other kids would be off to the side. They're actually working. I believe that they were watching a video and answering some questions about the video, and they were doing that independently. And then here she's stopped everybody, and now the groups are switching. And so now she is going to work with that group that was working on the video, and the group that she worked with would then go and they would get their device and watch that video on their own and answer the questions. So you can watch that on your own. I believe as part of our resources, we actually have an elementary model. Is that right, Tanya?
Yes, and this video is in there. It's in entirety as well. And yes, there's an elementary model and then one more as well.
Okay.
Awesome. So now that Kurt has defined what it is and the reasons behind it, I'm going to take you through a little segment that describes some sample schedules. Okay. So you start out with just a really simple template. And one thing that Kurt mentioned to you was that this can be personalized for you. He mentioned, determining, what you had to get done, how big your class size was, how much time you have. So this is just one sample template with 3 stations in its design. This could be 1 station per day, as we'll show you an example later. It could be 4 stations, it could be 6 stations. You're going to customize it yourself, but here's where it starts. Really simplistic. You've got your 4 station titles over to the left, and then you have your notes that you're going to follow and fill this up with as you're making your plan. This is just lesson planning. So on the next slide, you notice that there are lots of boxes filled in here. It's text heavy. So as the primary example, notice you still have the regular outline of the shell. And this is where you as an instructor would put in all of your notes and resources, links if you want, things that you need to know into these boxes. Now you've got 2 choices to make here. Notice that this is the primary sample schedule, and it is very text heavy. In this model that we're showing you here in this sample, this would be more like your lesson plan book, where this is where you're putting your resources in. You wouldn't necessarily share this with students. Can you imagine a 1st grader looking at this and saying, wow, I have to do what? It does not have very many graphics in it. It does have live links, but this is mostly for the teacher to work through. If you wanted to have a schedule that you would post in your learning management system, you would add more graphics to this, maybe just put the links for them in, and it would look a little bit different. The shell, the template would look the same, but how you would populate it would be different. You would want to add more graphics, and later on in the presentation, we'll talk to you a little bit about how to get these little pictures in here if you're not already familiar with that. So keep in mind what you're looking at now would be activities suitable for a primary level, lower grades, but it's text heavy. So this would be what you might use for your planning. Whereas on this screen here, this would be an upper grade sample and probably okay to give to a middle or high school student with this much text in it, with not so much filled with graphics here. Again, you could just use this as your planning, a collection of your resources and materials, but this could be posted in your learning management system to give directly to the students, and then they would follow along with this and know exactly what they were supposed to do, what materials they were supposed to use, links to click on when they rotated through each station. And then Kurt also talked about groups. So, you might have a group that you start out with 1 week, 1 month, 1 unit, 1 part of the year, 1 quarter, 1 semester. And then you have the opportunity to change it. Or you might want to, depending on the lesson that you're trying to teach or whatever the unit is, you might want to randomly group the students. So that's up to you. It can be data driven. So if it's like a reading or a math group, you might need to have the students who are at a certain skill level grouped together so that their small group instruction with a teacher is more targeted to their learning needs. Whereas if it's more, let's say it's a group project that they're working on, social studies, maybe science, where the skill level isn't necessarily your target here, but you want different students with different skills together, different talents, different learning styles. You can group them randomly, and this can change every single week. So group 1, group 2, group 3, you could use this template and decide who is going to be in which group depending on what your targets are. And then this could be the schedule that you give them so that they know, and the 15 minutes could actually be time frames. So you could put, what time you're going to start and what time you're going to end at the top. And then group 1 would know what time they're supposed to rotate to which station here. You could make these hyperlinks so that they would know who is in their group if you wanted to link out to the list of students as well. Here on this screen, we have several different models. So with each one of these are just the images of the schedules, the station rotation models. And then there's an article that gives you a little bit more information. This one here for middle and high, this is a scenario where they're 90-minute class blocks, and the number of students in this particular article for this sample is 30. So that's a high number of students in the class, and it's a large period of time. And so this teacher has decided to make 6 learning station rotations. And if you go into the article, not only does it highlight why she does that, but the highlight here is that, the benefit here is that she can work with the small groups, provide real-time feedback, answer questions that they have, lend them whatever support they need, guide them to appropriate resources depending on what they need. So there's one model there. And then here for the elementary model, this is just 4 station rotations. And not only does the article determine or tell you more information about what each station might look like, but it also details not only what is at each station, but highlights the importance of assessment in determining what kind of groups you're going to put the students in, and then just affirms their worth. This is a neat example here in a hybrid environment. So I know high school is about to go into where they're seeing their students for the first time on 3-week rotations. And so that means that they'll have 1 group at school and then 2 groups at home, and they'll rotate in and out. And so a station rotation can work for that model as well. So notice we've got 2 virtual groups and 2 face-to-face groups. The face-to-face would be the groups that are in the school, present with the teacher in the classroom, while still members of that class are at home learning. Each one of these groups has a unique schedule rotation. And so I'm just going to click on 2 here and show you the slight differences. So with virtual group 1, they're going to meet with the teacher first and then continue through activities in station 2 or 3, 2, and 1. And what that might look like is instructions here to meet with the teacher first. And then the teacher would tell them, go ahead and set your timers and move on to station 3, then rotate to 2, and then this instructs them to go to station 1. 2 is very similar to that, but with a slight variation. So you would need a separate template, a separate schedule for each student. So with, whoops, sorry, I just need to go back. Sorry, we're going crazy here. Group 2 looks similar. But for this one, the students are told to work on a station number 1 before they go meet with the teacher. And then after the teacher meets with them, they have the instructions on the slide of where to go next, and all of the instructions that they need to follow and the links that they need to click on are right there. And then a similar schedule would follow for group 3 and group 4. So these could be posted in the student's LMS. It could be posted just to them. So we don't need group members from group 1 to see what group 3 needs to work on. You would just send this individually to the students that need to see these. And then this last one here is an example of just one station per day. So it might be that the content is very heavy. This is a high school example here. Content might be heavy. It might be that you are low on time. You have to do most of your teaching full group, and you only want to spend a little bit of time in groups. And so this is what it might look like if you do just one group per day. So you've got one whole lesson you might do, and then say, okay, now break up into your groups today. On Tuesday, you do a whole group meeting or whatever else you need to do during that time. And then you say, so this is Tuesday, so make sure you know which group you're going to, and then it accounts for an asynchronous day on Wednesday in this particular example. And Friday might be where you could put in your Genius Hour work, or it could be where they might have a choice board and they're working through things at their own pace. And so that could be Friday's routine right there. So as Kurt did mention earlier, you're going to customize this to whatever needs you have in your classroom. What are you teaching? How much time do you have? How much technology do you have available? So how many students can be on technology at the same time? Can you account for collaborative groups? You have room to customize this any way that you want to. But one thing to consider, especially for those that are just entering this hybrid learning experience, is consider your schedule thoughtfully before you finalize it. And avoid that confusion from changing it up, where parents understand that this is the schedule, but the students got word that it changed up, and then people are communicating in different ways, and frustration helps. So run this by your PLN, run this by your administrator, run this by your teammates, and see if there's any glitches, anything that might go wrong or might be a challenge for you before you send this out and finalize it to your students. Okay, so that was a lot. We're going to give you a second to post questions. We're going to check for questions in the chat. And also give you a chance to think for a second and kind of comprehend all of that heavy information that we just sent you. And Jennifer's going to help you with this with a little reflection activity so far.
Okay, so, Kurt has defined station rotations for you and told you what it looks like. And Tanya has, given you a ton of samples. Now we just want you to give your thoughts and feedback on, like, how do you foresee that station rotations could benefit students? And you can simply click on the white box if you are in the presentation. If not, Chris or Mary Clay will be posting the link in the chat for you to be able to access that Mentimeter. And Tanya, if you want to show them what it's going to look like once they click on that. And right there, you're just going to type your responses to how can station rotations benefit students. And then as you submit your answers, we'll have it pop up on our results page. And as Tanya said, this is also a time, if you do have questions from all the information that we have shared thus far, feel free to put those in the chat also, and we can address those while the other responses are coming in. Great to see we already have a couple answers. Yes, I love that you get more interaction when you're working with students in small groups and building that student agency. Awesome. Chris or Mary Clay, do we have any outlying questions in the chat by chance?
Not
No,
at this
moment.
time.
Okay, thanks, both of you. And just so you're aware, as we're using this Mentimeter, this is also something you could use with your students when you're teaching to gather thoughts and ideas and feedback from them. There's multiple scenarios you can use with Mentimeter. This just happens to be one of their speech bubble ones.
Jennifer, do I have to refresh to see them, or is this live?
It should be live, but you can exit out and go back into it again just to verify or refresh.
Ah, yes.
Oh,
Okay.
look at that. Yes. Apparently you do have to refresh. I apologize. Thank you,
Okay.
Tanya.
All right. So, good stuff. Yes.
Yes.
At their own pace. And that pace thing too, it could be a timer is set, but it could be very open-ended, or each station could be a different amount of time. You have so many options when you're designing
Exactly.
your
Yes. And the addressing different learning styles, that's very important, talking about that personalized instruction for students, and working in a way that works best for them. Awesome responses. Yes. And this link, continue to add, if other thoughts come up as we continue to go through this session, because this link for the responses will live here in the presentation. So feel free, even later, you can go back and continue to peruse what people have added.
Very good. Awesome.
And as long as there haven't been any other questions that have come up in the chat, I think we're good for the next section.
We're all good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary Clay.
One more refresh and make sure. All right, good. Yep, so they're still coming in. So definitely check back. That link will be in there.
Yes.
And these responses could spark some ideas that maybe you had not even thought of up to this point. All right, so the next section right here is where we're going to lay the groundwork for you. So we have to do more than just tell you what it is and then give you some templates. Okay, so we're going to move into our management norms and routines section before we have you do a free explore. So in order for you to have success with this, we have to help you consider a couple of things, like how you're going to manage this. How are you going to make time to plan and put these things together? And then how are the students also going to be able to manage this on their own? Because they're going to need to be taught, how do I move through these stations? And what are these norms and routines that are going to be established in the class to help this make this a smooth route, a smooth route for you? So Jennifer's going to start us off with our management norms and routines section.
Because yes, you can have the schedule sample and know what it is and videos of it, but you really have to have that management base, that strong structure. And in here, we've divided it between your instructional management and your productivity management. Instructional, there's several videos there that can offer you tips and tricks and things. And these might be strategies and things that you not only use personally, but also you share with your students and teach your students, especially the top two ones on the top right there. If you're not familiar with inserting an image from the camera roll, phenomenal resource, especially with our distance learning. And inserting audio into slides, that's something that you can use for accessibility for students who maybe struggle with reading, or it can also be students who maybe struggle with typing. You can have them use audio to input items into their presentations for you or their assignments. And then under productivity, these are things, they just make better use of your time. There might even be some here that you decide to teach your students, but for the most part, more of these might be for you. And under keyboard shortcuts, most of you have probably heard, Control-C and Control-V, and that you're familiar with those keyboard shortcuts. But on here, we have a plethora of ones that maybe you haven't heard of. All you have to do is click the arrow on the right side for the drop-down menus, and it'll give you a whole wide variety. But the one I want to highlight for you today is a wonderful Windows shortcut, which is the Windows key plus the period, and it opens an emoji keyboard for you. And feel free, if you wanted right now, to even try it. Press your window key and tap the period, and it'll pop up, and you can type something and throw an emoji in the chat for us. Maybe how you're feeling right now or what you think about this presentation. But the other thing is there is an emoji keyboard shortcut, because I find sometimes when I'm using the one that's built into Windows that it doesn't have maybe all the emojis that I'm looking for. Maybe I want a little bit more of a variety or selection. And there is an extension for an emoji keyboard that you can add to your device if you would like. Where Tanya says remove from Chrome, it's because hers is already installed. If you click on that link, yours would say add to Chrome if you don't already have it, and then it will live up on your bookmark bar, kind of at the top where Tanya's cursor is right now. And all you would need to do is click on it, and from there you can search for whatever emoji you would like to use.
And then for Google Keep, this is more, I don't want to say it's just a management for you. Of course, you can use it with your students. But let's see, we're going to go into, I don't want to open the Keep. I'm driving the presentation for everybody, so I'm a little spastic here. Okay, so in Google Keep, you have next to Docs, Slides, Draw, Calendar, and Sheets, your little panel of tasks, calendar, and your Keep notes. And this is a good place, just a little management productivity tip for you. As you are compiling graphics that you might use, canned responses that you might use, notes that you might put into your presentations. You can keep them in your Google Keep, and then you have them right next to the presentation, your templates, and you can just slide them in or take information from websites that you're using, put them into your Google Keep, and you have them handy for you to just slide right into your presentations. So keep in mind, Google Keep is a good place to compile all of your information in one place as you start to build those station rotations out. All right. And our next is our norms and routines. So as we said, you don't want to say, okay, everybody, we're going to do stations today. So here's the list of where you're going. Go and work on your assignment. Okay. So these are some things for you to consider to teach your group ahead of time with much practice. Again, this isn't something you might do overnight, but this is an environment, a climate that you might establish in your classroom. So these are links. When you click on the buttons, they'll take you to examples, but do consider timers so that students don't lose track of time and know when to come back to your class, when to switch rotations. Make sure that they know what their role is, whether they're in the classroom or whether they are virtual, what they should be doing in each groups, and make sure that they know what the definition of each of those jobs are. And then brain breaks are a good idea to use as they're switching stations too. It's really hard to go from one train of thought and jump right into the next activity, or having a rich conversation without taking that brain break and kind of resetting yourself. Thinking routines is one that we want to talk about a little bit more, as well as norms and back channels. Thinking routines is a way to create a culture in your classroom where students are really understanding what is what's important to highlight. What kinds of things do I talk about? And say, instead of saying things like, oh, those were a great word choice, you might want to say things like, so tell me a little bit about why you use that word choice here. So it kind of enriches their thinking. And then most of the conversations, whether they are in collaborative groups or with the teacher groups, are those critical thinking, high level thinking skills. And so the idea behind this, and this is just for your perusal here, is that there are several categories that you might want to use with your classes. How might you want them to be thinking? What do you want to target? And then underneath each one are a variety of activities that you could use. And the idea behind this is for you to choose just one or two of those thinking routines in the category that you want to target and practice those over and over, the same routine over and over in different situations, so that your class really becomes this culture of high-level thinkers and productive workers, and not spending a lot of time on the things that don't really move the class along, that you don't want to spend as much time on. So consider thinking routines as a norm and routine in your classroom. And Kurt, you're going to talk about norms of collaboration?
I am, if you want to click on that link. So that link is going to just take you out to a website, and we've included some norms. So just like everything else, any kind of process, any kind of routine, we have to teach our students how to work together, right? That's not something that's intuitive for most of our kids. And so here we've got various documents. But the first one just talks about actually setting what those norms are going to look like. So we're going to pause, we're going to ask questions, we're going to provide data, we're going to put ideas out on the table. And then there's a sheet that actually explains what each of those means. And then we've also included some ratings here, some rating scales, so that kids could rate themselves on how they did. How did I do posing questions? How did I do pausing and listening? Groups could rate each other. They could rate their whole group, right? I think our group did very good at pausing, but I don't think we did very good at paraphrasing. And then the teacher could also rate as well. And so these are just free for you to use. Feel free to take them, to modify them. And use them, whatever way it's going to work in your classroom.
And the next norm we're going to share with you is back channels. You may or may not be familiar with back channels. It's a way to allow the conversation to continue just like the word says, kind of in the background, you know, and it allows your students to still continue to have on-topic conversations, even while you, the teacher, are still teaching. Or it could be during some of your, you know, asynchronous learning, if they have a question and they can post it to the group. And it could be something that not only you answer, but other students within the classroom are able to answer it. And there's a variety of Wake County approved back channels that you can use. One of them that we're actually using here is the Google Meet chat, where we have, you know, Chris and Mary Clay moderating the chat questions for us. It could be that you're using the messaging within your Google Classroom. You can set up Padlets, even using docs and slides or Jamboards. And Flipgrid is a great space if you're, you know, with the younger students and you're like, even if my kids have a question to ask me, they can't necessarily type that question to me. You can have a video response within Flipgrid and still have that conversation going between you and your students. Also, when you're in person in class, it could be a poster board in the back of the classroom that they put a sticky note on if they have questions, or if they want it private between just you and them, you can have a little comment box on your desk, and you know, they can just slip a note in there that you can read at the end of the day, along with an SOS strategy on Discovery Ed. And similar to these, just like what we said with all of the things with station rotations, where Tanya touched upon, you know, the thinking routines, and you just want to make sure that you're setting, you know, that foundation for your students, because once again, back channels aren't something that you're just like, poof, guys, we're going to do back channels today. Like, you really want to set that precedence and walk them through, how do you do it? What does it look like? And there is even a key down there that kind of, you know, helps your students with realizing, like, what are we using back channels for today? So they could serve different purposes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, whoops, I clicked on, there we go. All right, so just one more thing to think about here. One more quote. One of the benefits also of using the station rotations right here is in this quote here, if you want to take a second to read that. And then we're going to pause here for a second. We're going to put one of these best practices into practice right here. We're just going to pause right here to see if we have any questions from the moderators in the chat. And this is your brain break. If you don't have any questions, you can spend just a minute practicing, maybe spelling your name, or spell station rotations in sign language here. So while we're checking moderators in chat, if you want to just kind of work on your name here for a second, take a little brain break before we send you into the next segment. Moderators, anything that we have missed?
Not at this time. You're doing great. Thanks.
All right. All right. Kurt, how'd you do? Did you spell your last name or your name?
Not my last name. That would take a while.
All
But
right.
my first name I could get.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so just a little fun brain break. I tried that one out on my high schooler, and she then got obsessed with sign language and pulled out all my textbooks and wants to take a Wake Tech course on sign language too. So that one is good for all grade levels as well, regardless of what you teach, what level you teach. So tried and true and tested. All right, Jennifer's got our next section here. She's going to take you on a voyage.
So now we want to give you an opportunity to explore. You know, we've told you, you know, once again, like what it looks like, and here's a sample, and then talking about laying the groundwork. But what we've provided here for you, and we're going to give you some time to explore, is these are lesson examples that other teachers have used during station rotations with their students. And you can choose between the teacher-led, collaborative, or individual. The one thing with this slide to keep in mind when you're navigating it, when you click on one of the folders, in order to get back to the folders, you're going to click in the bottom right corner in order to head back to the examples. So these, you will kind of toggle back and forth between those slides for those 3 areas of lesson examples. And then on the next slide, we have some templates for you. These are just kind of, you know, blank. You've seen the examples of how they're done. Now here's some blank templates for you to fill in. And if you're already familiar with station rotations, maybe, or you're like, oh my goodness, I just really want to like enhance what I'm already doing with station rotations and make it meatier, and you know, that's what that template on the left hand side would be used for. we're not necessarily recommending that if you're just kind of starting station rotations. It might kind of make your head explode a little bit. But yes, if you're ready for more, that's definitely a place to start. And then our templates will take you out to the same website where Kurt had taken you for the norms. And on here we have additional samples of choice boards and playlists that you can look at by clicking on that picture on the right-hand side. But wait, there's more. For those of you who maybe your mind just isn't right now where you're wanting to look at templates or samples or things like that, or you're someone who prefers to read, articles. These are some of the articles that we've referenced further back in the presentation, and there might be a couple new ones in there too. Or if you're someone who would rather watch a video, we do have those videos linked right here for you also. What we are planning to do is to give you about 10 minutes or so in order for you guys to peruse these samples. Of course, we will be here if any questions pop up, but we just want you to make the best use of this time right now. And based on our schedule, we have about 10 minutes. Tanya's going to start that timer for us, and you guys get to go explore.
All right, so as you start to build out your stations and you start to think about what that might look like in your classroom, we want to remind you, one, using those Wake County approved sources, but you can actually record your own. So you could record your own mini lesson that you just have the kids access independently in a station, using tools like Screencast-O-Matic, Screencastify. Flipgrid is another great a great one, because in Flipgrid you can set it up so the kids can comment back and forth, and you can moderate that as the teacher so that you have to approve it before those comments show up. And then there's existing resources, Canvas and Edpuzzle and Discovery Ed and NC WiseOwl and Khan Academy. For the older kids, I believe, don't we have the New York Times subscription as well? So all of those are resources that you can use that are already there. And I think that when we talk about the resources, it's important to keep in mind, like, during this time is not the time to introduce like 15 new tools to your kids when we're in this in-person virtual back and forth kind of environment. So stick to what your kids know, or pick one and teach it to them and get them to be very proficient at using that tool before you start adding additional tools. So with that, we've got another Mentimeter. This time you're going to click the link, and it's going to ask you, when it comes to station rotations, I am feeling, and you can enter up to 3. You don't have to enter 3, but you could enter 3 words to describe how you're feeling.
All very justified thoughts, all of them. So as as Kurt said, in the chat are the links to the results. So as they continue to come in, you could use that link, kind of look at where your colleagues are. Lots.
All right. Again, Mentimeter is a free tool. You can use it with your kids. If you haven't, it's very easy to use as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Tanya to wrap us up.
All right. So just to keep you going with this, there are other blended learning models coming up as well. Individual rotation will be held next week. All sessions are recorded and posted on the Digital Learning Coordinator's website along with the resources. And then on January 27th is going to be maximize engagement using backward planning and design. So if you want to check those out, those are coming up. And we will continue this throughout February as well. These are just the next two. Looking at your Mentimeters, overwhelmed, encouraged, ready to go, excited. You can reach out to your area DLCs if you need any help with getting started with this or anything else. And there are other resources as well on the Digital Learning Coordinator's website. And before you leave, we do take your feedback very seriously when we're considering topics that we offer to you and how we present the information to you. So if you would leave us feedback, that's very, very important to us. If we need to reach out to you, you can indicate that in the feedback as well and meet you exactly where you are with your needs. Those links should also be posted in the chat, I believe, or you can get to the link right here from the presentation. And we thank you for coming. And if you've got any questions, we'll hang out here for a few extra minutes. Let us know if you need anything and reach out if you need to, and have fun exploring. You've got lots and lots and lots to look at as we part today.